Welcome back to the show. My name is Mikhail, and I'm here with a man that needs no introduction, but for formality purposes, George, CryptosRUs, and Judge on the next crypto gym. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mikhail. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here hanging out with you. Let's jump right into it, George. You talk about Bitcoin every day on your channel, multiple times a day. As we're headed into this second half of 2023, what do you think the future holds for Bitcoin?
Um, I think the second half of this year will be interesting. I think we've already exceeded expectations, in my opinion. I think most people forget we started this year, 2023, horribly. Like the first 2 weeks of January of 2023, Bitcoin was hovering around 16,000. It was very bleak, right? But we knew that at that bleak moment, that's usually when things turn around. When people capitulate, that's usually when people turn, the market turns around. But even at that time, I'm like, I'd be glad if Bitcoin ends at 30 to 35,000 by the end of the year, right? And I think we overachieved. We overshot that. We broke through 30K, even though we're a little bit lower now, hovering around 27. But I don't think anyone expected Bitcoin to gain so much strength in such a short amount of time, primarily because of the macro conditions, right? 2022 was absolutely horrible. Nonstop rate hikes, one after another, after another, after another. US markets and markets around the world were tanking due to recession fears, right? So I don't think anyone really thought, honestly, if they're being honest with themselves, that this first half of this of 2023 was going to be good. But guess what? It was better than what most people thought, because for the first time in Bitcoin's history, we saw Bitcoin get stronger with bank weakness. We have never seen that before, ever in Bitcoin. The reason being because Bitcoin was created after the last, um, housing bubble when all these banks collapsed. That's why Satoshi created Bitcoin. So for since 2009 till now, until 2022, we haven't heard of any major catastrophe with banks getting weak and closing down, right? And then we saw three in a row in 2023, and that actually strengthened Bitcoin, right? So for the very first time, we saw people actually seeing Bitcoin as a true store of value rather than flock to gold or silver or to bonds or notes. Some flock to Bitcoin, and that's very exciting. First time in Bitcoin's history. It may seem like everything has happened already. No, this is the first time in what, 13 years, 14 years, that we actually saw Bitcoin being a true store of value, especially when, banks are getting weaker right now. Like, that's phenomenal. So, second half of this year, I see more of the same thing. I see we'll hear more about bank weakness that will help. Right now, there's a lot of macro stuff like the US debt ceiling and stuff like that. I think that'll be resolved, right? But as we see more weakness or more elevated inflation, maybe we see inflation start rising up again. Kind of some of these macro stuff, I think, will still drive more people to Bitcoin. And by the end of the year, I think Bitcoin's going to be a lot higher than where it is now. So I'm thinking Bitcoin could easily be at 40, 45,000 by the end of this year. So I see us slowly trending up towards that.
What do you think about the catalyst that will trigger the next bull run? You talked about macro conditions. Obviously, there's still a war going on. There's, of course, the regulatory aspect of everything that we're going through here in the United States. We seem to be very behind the rest of the world when it comes to that. What is going to be that catalyst that will propel us into the next bull run?
I don't think we really need a catalyst. I think Bitcoin has been following the 4 year cycle ever since it came out, and I don't think it's going to be any different this time around. I think there will be smaller catalysts, that drives people to Bitcoin. For example, we're starting to see countries adopt Bitcoin, right? Obviously, El Salvador started at first, but other countries are becoming more favorable to crypto and Bitcoin. That's like a catalyst, right? It's not going to be an immediate effect where we see Bitcoin jump up 100,000 within a day. No, it's not going to be like that, but it's like a slow trickle effect, right? We're starting to see that. Um, Other things, I look at are fundamentals. You can't ignore the fundamentals. Bitcoin has never been stronger than now if you look at the fundamentals, right? So that's definitely a driver. And what I mean by that, because most people think, well, fundamentals are just price, 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 right? If Bitcoin's lower than 70,000, not at all-time high, it can't be as strong as before, right? No, entirely wrong. If you look at addresses, number of addresses growing, all-time high. Number of addresses holding, for example, zero point zero 0.01 Bitcoin, holding zero point 0.1 Bitcoin, holding 1 Bitcoin, 5 Bitcoin, 10 Bitcoin, right? All time high. You look at Bitcoin being held, okay, over 10 years, 7 years, 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, all time high, right? The hash rate of the network, all time high. Lightning Network usage, all time high, right? These are all metrics showing the strength of Bitcoin, the fundamentals of Bitcoin, and they're all at all-time high, despite the fact that our price is only at 27,000, right? So that to me is a clear sign that price is lagging fundamentals, right? And I say this on my show all the time: price lags the hash rate. Bitcoin is the only crypto where the price trails the hash rate. No other coin is like that, right? So that's another. I don't know if you could view that as a catalyst, but I view that as a sign. Like, there's no way this thing is not going to go higher when every single measurable metric of Bitcoin is at an all-time high right now. I mean, that's extremely bullish, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Like, another one that a lot of people are talking about is China, Hong Kong, opening up crypto trading for retail investors, right? That's just the beginning. Eventually they're going to open up to all mainland China, and institutions may be already allowed to invest in Hong Kong too. So that's a huge thing, I think, right? That could be a mini catalyst, or maybe it leads to a huge catalyst down the road. So there's a lot of little things that's going on, right? But that's why I'm so bullish. Like, I just know that we're still so early, despite Bitcoin being around for 14 years.
Yeah, that's the really interesting part, and I feel like Bitcoin lately has been going through a change. It's gotten a little bit more congested. There are some meme coins popping up, BRC20s, ordinals. What do you make of all that? Is it good for the network? And if people are continuously expanding and scaling Bitcoin, is there a day where we're not going to have any altcoins because everything can just be done on the Bitcoin network?
No, that'll never happen. We will certainly have Bitcoin and others. Um, so that's another point. But as for BRC20 or ordinals, I think it's very interesting. I think it does show that, yeah, we're still so early, right? We all view Bitcoin as a medium exchange, store of value, possibly a hedge against inflation, but not as a contracts platform, right? Not as a platform for now stable coins. The very first one came out. Not as a platform for NFTs or meme coins or just really anything. But BRC20 opens up possibilities for many things, right? I think it's going to be interesting because there's concerns about congestion, the 1 meg block size, and there's concerns about MEV, I believe, which basically essentially is miners will start selecting what they want to process because it's more profitable. And that's something that Ethereum miners had we're doing before they move to proof of stake, and other projects that are still with mining. I think there's things that need to be resolved there, right? But I'm sure they will get resolved. The developers of Bitcoin, they're smartest people on earth, and they'll figure it out. But as for utility, more utility coming to Bitcoin, fantastic. More utility means more users, and that's what we want, right? But as for everything else out there, right? No, there's still a need. There are ones that have already figured it out, that are super scalable. They already have token standards. There's a ton of games on them, right? It's kind of like when I never really debate Bitcoin maxis, but I find the argument silly because I'm like, okay, let's say outside crypto world. If you're a gold investor, does that mean you should not invest in Apple or Microsoft or any tech company? No, because they serve two different purposes, right? That's kind of how I see it. Bitcoin right now is still store value, right? And it's like a digital gold. Ethereum and everything else are operating systems, right? They're layer ones or layer twos or even layer zeros that are the foundations of dApps. So the two really have, I mean, with BRC20, it's a little bit closer, but they're really separated. And even if they were competing in the same realm, I mean, the world is big enough for more than one, right? That's the funny thing. Like you look at traditional companies, how many tech companies are there? There's millions out there, right? The market is big enough for more than one or two or three. So that's the thing. I think there's a lot of tribalism in crypto. So and then people is like it makes it seem like people only believe one can survive. That's ridiculous. There's so many that everything can survive, right? They may not become the behemoths of the tomorrow, but everything can survive.
It's funny you mentioned the gold versus Apple comparison. I actually used that same question when I was down in Miami for the Bitcoin conference, and obviously surrounded by a lot of maxis. Which it's still very interesting to talk to maxis because you get a different perspective about Bitcoin, which obviously is the granddaddy of them all. But when it comes to these altcoins, we obviously know that Ethereum, which may not be considered an altcoin anymore, but you also have Binance, you have Avalanche, you have a lot of chains that already established themselves in the marketplace. What are some of the maybe earlier or newer chains that you are maybe not necessarily investing in, but you're very curious about? You're trying to learn more about them.
Yeah, a lot of chains that I support and believe in, they all came out in 2007. For example, Avalanche, Polygon, Cardano, even Phantom, VeChain. These all came out in 2017, 2018, right? But we got a lot of new exciting chains, like especially the L2s, like Arbitrum hit the market by storm, right? Because Ethereum still can't scale. So you have L2s like Arbitrum, Optimism, ZK Sync that's blowing up right now, especially if you're looking at TVL. But Arbitrum in particular, there's a lot of projects on Arbitrum right now. But it helps ETH still, right? Because everything is still done in ETH. Um, so they're interesting, definitely interesting. But there's a couple of new ones that that also came out. For example, Aptos, that's new. Sui is new, right? It'll be quite interesting to see what's happening with them. Like from what I'm hearing, these new chains or chains basically themselves are looking for volume, right? It's great to launch and then you're a multi-billion-dollar chain already, but how you measure how good they are, there's only a few, you know, volume count, daily volume count, or overall volume count, right? And then you also look at like number of dApps, and also you look at TVL, like how much value is locked in to these chains, right? So a lot of these chains are like gunning for these new projects to come aboard, and they're throwing grants or whatever at them, like, hey, come on board and utilize us, right? And they're competing with the incumbents like the ones I mentioned, and also like you have like Near, Solana, and there's many others that's out there. ICP, that they're relatively new, but not the new players anymore. So there's like a lot of chains competing right now. So I'm kind of like watching them. I love chains. I love L1s, L2s because, like I said, they're like the foundation, they're the backbone of future dApps. So it'll be interesting to see which ones come out on top. We kind of know already right now, like if you look at top 10, like Binance Smart Chain is up there, right? And you got Cardano, you even throw XRP in there. We know the top dogs already, but are the mid and lower tier ones, are they going to start rising up? I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah. So when you talk to a lot of your fans on your channel, and you talk about how to invest, not financial advice, of course, but how do you recommend people break up their portfolio between Bitcoin and some of these other altcoins that they're looking at?
I've always, before early on, and I think this is good for people that are getting into the space for the first time. I've always said the 50-25-25 rule is great. 50% in Bitcoin, 25% in big caps. And big caps is, the cutoff changes because the market cap of coins change. So I would say I used to say 10 billion plus, but now I would say these days maybe like 6 billion plus. So 25% in big caps and then 25% in small caps. And small caps could be small, micro, whatever you want. And the reason for this breakup is you still want Bitcoin, the big daddy, to be, having a big part of your portfolio because you want that stability and growth. We have seen periods where Bitcoin is the only thing that goes up and everything else is stagnant and goes down. You don't want that. If that's the case, then you might as well just hold all Bitcoins, right? You don't want to see the value of your portfolio in Bitcoins go down because sometimes that happens. You see like alts being really weak and then Bitcoin is the only thing going up. And then in your portfolio manager, you look at it, you look at not the dollar value, but the BDC value of your portfolio, you'll see that drop. And that's horrible, right? But there's times where it's the opposite. Alts move faster. So you actually gain on Bitcoin, right? That's why the other 50%, 25% of big caps, because big caps do have the ability to move faster in Bitcoin. And these days they're relatively stable. Even though there's still volatility, they're nowhere near as volatile as like 2018 when Ethereum dropped to like $100. Okay, we're not going to see Ethereum drop to $100. We're just not, right? So big caps have gotten a lot stronger, so that's why 25%, and then 25% small micro caps. They're more risky, obviously, a lot of volatility, but they also swing up very very fast in bull runs, right? And they can definitely carry your portfolio. So traditionally speaking, I've been recommending this kind of diversification, this kind of breakup. But something new that I've started talking about is having that cash pile, having a cash pile of about 20, 25, 30% in cash. And that's important to DCA. Okay, so you could continue DCA and dollar cost average as you go along. So, and some people will say, well, 50 plus 25 plus 25, 25 is not 100, right? So I mean that whatever 75% of of your total cash, let's say, like your total value, the 75% part you could break down into 50, 25, 25, but also leave 25% in cash. So that way, if something catastrophic happens or nothing happens, you just want a DCA, you're able to do so. And why that's also great is because people ask me on the flip side, how do I take profits? Because if you start seeing your crypto portfolio going up in a big way and your cash pile naturally decreases just because the crypto is gaining in value, that's a good sign to take some off the table and make sure that cash pile stays at around that 25% mark, right? So I think it's a great way to keep yourself motivated to keep going for long haul, but also a great strategy to take profits, right? With
Any specific platforms that you recommend to manage portfolios?
Oh, there's plenty of them. I mean, there's ones that actually tap into the exchanges or your wallets. I don't do that. I use Delta Investment app. I think eToro bought them, but this is a great app. You just plug in the numbers. It can hook into the centralized exchanges and DEX if you wanted to, but I just input everything. But there's a lot out there. I mean, CMC has their own portfolio tracker. CoinGecko has their own. I mean, there's probably a dozen of them out there. So that's what I use. You could use. I mean, even like yeah, even wallets like Trust Wallet. You could see the value of everything, but it doesn't give you as much information.
So we covered Bitcoin, we covered altcoins. You even mentioned that micro cap coins are a good part of an investment strategy. One thing that I admire about you, George, is that you also have a very business mindset. So outside of your channel, outside of you being a judge at the next crypto gym, you also get involved with these really early stage projects that you feel like have a lot of potential. Can you walk us through a little bit about like what are some of the things that you're looking for when you're talking to these projects that give you a sign that okay, this has potential, and also keeping in mind that obviously this is a very risky play and not something that beginners should be getting into.
Right. So this is relatively new for me. I mean, I've been in this space for a long time, had my channel for a long time, but traditionally in the past, I would evaluate projects differently than I would now, right? Before I would say, okay, I'm hearing a lot about this project. Let's look at like the token economics. Let's look at who the leadership is, right? Let's figure out what the overall idea or concept of this project is, right? That's kind of like how I evaluate something that's relatively unknown. And I still do that to some extent, right? If there's a new project on CMC, I'm like, I have no clue that those are the things I'm looking at. But now talking to early stage projects, you can't evaluate them the same way. They Most of them don't have a token. They don't have a market cap, right? So you can't evaluate them on that. Most of them are new leaders that you never heard of before. So how do you critique that, right? And also general concept. A lot of them do have a concept, but it's not really formulated. So evaluating early stage projects or pre-launch projects is very, very different. But with that, I've developed some skills that I think has served me well so far. But again, this is relatively new for me. But I have spoken to, I don't know, probably 30 projects, 30 or 40 projects within the last few months. So I think I got a good handle. First of all, in terms of speaking to leaders, you could tell right away if you're asking questions, can they answer in an intelligent manner, in a smart manner, right? Do they know what they're talking about? And thankfully, most projects I talk to do have very competent leaders. But there are a few, I'm just scratching my head. I'm like, there's no way they're going to be successful with you leading them. It's just zero chance. So talking to these new leaders, I think will give you a really good understanding. Even a 30-minute conversation, you could tell if they got it together, they're the right person for the job, and whether or not they can really make this grow and succeed, right? So that's something reading. I guess reading the leaders, that's something new. Also, project concept and how they're marketing it, because a lot of projects are founded by developers or game makers, and that's what they're good at. But they're not really good at coming out with a way to describe their project well or how to market it well, right? And sometimes I think these projects need a lot of help with that, gaining traction, gaining viewership, gaining followers. So that's not a knock on them, but I just feel like a lot of projects do need a lot of help with that. But also, as for other things I look at, like what's your run rate, right? I'm kind of looking at it from an angel VC perspective. Like this is pre-token, so how are you funding this? Most projects, of course, are bootstrapping, right? Well, if you're bootstrapping, what's your run rate? What's your burn rate? You go run out of money in like 6 months. And then a lot of them are, raising pre-seed money or seed money. But something else I'm looking at is like, how are you managing money basically? I clearly I talked to this one project, and I don't know who it is, relatively small, but um, he was asking for X amount of money, right? Like, I'm like, okay, so then break down how long that's gonna last, and then he broke it down, and I'm like, okay, that's only gonna last you 6 months. What are you gonna do after 6 months? He's like, oh yeah, because I'm doing this for 6 months because then I'll have enough traction to launch this other project. I'm like, what? Who is gonna give you money to operate for 6 months so that you can now switch to something else? That makes zero sense, right? And that's something else that's something new that I'm getting good at, is like looking at money, how they're spending it, why they're raising what they're raising, how long they could last, and and is that all viable, I guess, before they launch their token, which then gives them more flexibility, or if they launch NFT collection, right? So it's different. It's very different talking to pre-launch, pre-seed projects versus evaluating something that's already out, that's a big name with big backers. It's very different.
Yeah, and you did some of this vetting on the upcoming show, the next Crypto Gym. Give us a little background about that.
Yeah, it's actually different. So next crypto gem is more of a, I would say it's like Shark Tank plus Apprentice. So it's really about finding the next gem. And we had a lot of great contestants, but us judges, we weren't acting like sharks. We're not like, okay, we're gonna give you this for this amount of equity. It wasn't like that. The contestants, the projects had to run through a series of challenges, and basically, they started getting eliminated through these challenges, and until we had just one. So it's a different experience. It's fun, but I say, this could definitely bring crypto to mainstream adoption. If the show becomes an instant success, kind of like Shark Tank, it can blow up and help everyone, help the entire industry. So that's what I'm looking forward to. But I will say this: I thought it was harder than I originally expected because throughout filming, you get you get attached to some of these projects and some of these leaders, and it's sad where you have to cut them. And then when you cut them, and then they give like a really heartfelt speech afterwards, it makes you feel like, wow, like did I make a mistake? And that I experienced that many times while filming, and it's very different. It really is.
What would you say you learned about yourself during that process?
Um, I definitely like because of what I do, my live streaming, it's very free flowing. I just say whatever comes to mind. If I make a mistake, so what? I move on, right? When you're filming a TV show, it's different. There are times where they want you to say is stick to a script, but thankfully we had the ability to kind of say what we wanted, even though we were given a script. But I'm not good at memorizing scripts, lines, and there's a lot more pressure when there's like 100 people with lights and camera and microphone and everything around you, right? Gives you a lot more pressure. So I definitely was not as comfortable in that environment as I am, say, now with you doing this interview or my normal streams. But hopefully, in time, as we do season 2, 3, 4, 5, I get better at it.
Yeah, you obviously got your hands full. I mean, you do a morning stream, you do a night stream, you do Twitter Spaces from time to time,
Oh
and
yeah,
sometimes if there's a FOMC meeting, you do a live stream during that. How do
yeah.
you how do you stay motivated?
You know what? This is how I look at it. If I was not doing what I'm doing, I would have a 9 to 5 job, right? And I think about it. Would I rather do what I'm doing now than work 9 to 5 for someone else? And the answer is yes. Yes, right? So in a 9 to 5 job, how many hours is that? That's 8 hours a day, right? If I'm not working 8 hours a day, I say that's a win. So that's kind of how I look at it. So between my morning stream, night stream, and talking to these projects, doing interviews, doing spaces, and whatever, right? If I'm not exceeding 8 hours a day, then I say I'm a win, right? So that's how I view it. I don't feel like all creators see it that way. A lot of creators say, well, I think I'm doing enough. I'm doing one stream a day, and I think that's enough. But that's just not how I see it. I don't view it as if it's enough. I view it as, well, this is a very competitive game. YouTube is, and social media in general. You're battling out with hundreds of others, right? So first of all, it's a competition. And second of all, I'm looking at it like, hey, I'd much rather be spending 8 hours a day at doing what I'm doing than working 8 hours a day for someone else, right? So what am I complaining about? I have a really good life. So what am I complaining about? I could do this, and that's kind of how I feel like it's become and don't get me wrong, there's plenty of times I don't want to stream, right? There's plenty of times where I'm like, I'm so tired. What am I doing? What you know? But part of it is the interaction with the audience changes that. Like during Q&A, my audience is very loyal and they know I love basketball, for example, or cars, right? And we make jokes. That revitalizes me a lot during my stream. Sometimes like, oh, I really don't want to stream. But then, we start talking, we start joking around and having a good time. And it makes me want to do it more. So that's honestly the truth, and I don't think everyone has that bond with their audience. Um, and a lot of people that don't live stream that do set recordings, then of course they're not going to get that interaction.
Yeah, I will say you spoil your fans a lot. You know, when you're out of town and you do those 10-minute streams, I'm like, man, where's George? He's, not doing the full stream.
Right.
So used to you doing it twice a day. So definitely very valuable content. Appreciate that. Last question for you, George. How's your experience with Network Spotlight? Obviously, this is a brand new community that I started of Web3 builders, ecosystem heads, and venture capitalists that are pioneering Web3. What's your experience been so far?
It's been horrible. No, just kidding. I'm very glad that you reached out because you reached out to me like a couple months ago, right? Hearing that I wanted to broaden my horizons, talk with projects and stuff like that. I'm really glad and thankful that you reached out, introduced me to Network Spotlight, right? It kind of changed the game for me. Um, a lot of these projects that's within Network Spotlight, they're young projects, not just young. There's some very established projects, a lot of experienced people, hungry people that they're just in the space looking to connect or looking to learn, looking to connect with others, in the same space, right? I think it's very unique. It's very unique, and I think you have done a great job with it. And I think it could become something much bigger. To be honest, like one time I tweeted out, I'm like, what are the best networking groups out there? I don't think I received one good answer. It was all like pump and dump groups or weird gaming, not weird, but like gaming groups. Like there was really no network groups. I think traditionally speaking, you network through like LinkedIn, but it's very impersonal, right? Like you connect and you don't know what to do afterwards. Should I say something to them? Should I not? I get a lot of connections on LinkedIn from marketers, but I want to connect with true people, leaders, and projects, right? That's what Network Spotlight does. And I think there's very little of that in this space. So I would highly recommend anyone that really wants to connect with others in the field to join it. It's a fantastic group.
Thanks a lot, George. Appreciate that. And part of that value is the fact that you're part of it. You're contributing to the value of this group. So certainly appreciate your contributions as well. For those listening, definitely be sure to check out CryptosRUs YouTube channel. Follow George on Twitter, which is also CryptosRUs, right, George?
Yeah, there's an underscore because unfortunately someone actually took just CryptosRus. But if you search for it, it's definitely the first one that comes up, CryptosRus.
Yeah, and there are some scam handles out there, so everybody be careful, be aware.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I have over 200,000 followers, so like that's a clear giveaway. A lot of these scammer ones are like 20 subscribe followers, right? So you know that's not me. And plus, I paid for the blue check mark. So
yes. Anywhere else people can connect with you? Are those two platforms the best?
yeah, it's really those two. I mean, Twitter, YouTube, right? People can email me, but I'd rather not give out my email. But yeah, I mean, I would say those two places would be the best.
Denver or Miami?
Denver, Denver. I think Denver's gonna win. I don't care for either team, but if I had to choose, if I had to place a bet, it would be Denver for sure.
That could probably be a podcast of its own.
Yes,
Thanks so much for being here, George. It was a real pleasure.
no problem. Thanks for having me.